Alright, so I've got some brand new Milwaukee tools here. I'm just about to throw these in the car, then we're going to head to work, and I want to spend all day testing and trying out as many of these Milwaukee tools as possible and see how they go on the work site.
Today we're back at the extension job from the video I posted last week. We're going to continue framing up the new part of the extension, and this whole day is going to be based around the tools we're using while framing up the extension. Since we are doing framing today, one of the tools I'm going to use the most is definitely going to be the circular saw. I've said this before in a few videos, but I'm not a fan of Milwaukee's circular saws. I find the saws to be bulky and the triggers to be really clunky when you use them. Now I do want to start with that and let you guys know what I don't like about these saws. And with that out of the way, I want to spend the rest of the day looking into some of the good features that these saws offer. And I also want to point out that it has been probably 5 to 6 years since I've spent a full day using Milwaukee tools. So I am going into this open-minded and want to see if the saw does grow on me throughout the day. The reason I chose today to make this video testing Milwaukee tools is because one of the guys I'm working with also runs Milwaukee, and he's got a few other Milwaukee tools that I don't have, which I'm going to use to test out today, such as the hammer drill, planer, and impact wrench. He also does have a Milwaukee framer, but unfortunately someone else had it today, and that was one tool that I really wanted to get my hands on for this video. So obviously I am using the AEG framer instead, but I do want to make a standalone video in the future just dedicated to nail guns. There's so much to talk about with nail guns, so we'll get our hands on the Milwaukee framer and have a good look at that then.
If you got a spare sec, can I just get a hand lifting this wall up, please? Ready? One thing I really like about the saw is the way the guard's built. It's built in a way that if you do want to do a small cut like this to square the end off, it's not going to jam up. You can take like 3mm or 2mm off the timber without your guard getting in the way. It kind of comes back on the angle, so that as you go through with that blade, it just slowly pushes itself up. So you can see that angle there compared to other saws, which don't really have the angle. And if I got to take 3mm off with this AEG saw here, the guard starts to hit the timber and it kind of pushes the saw away. Might be easier to see from the bottom. See that guard there at the bottom, it slides the saw blade away. Whereas in Milwaukee, it's probably the best saw guard I've actually ever used.
I'm not sure if I'm the only one that does this, but a massive pet peeve of mine is when I put beams in and the writing's upside down. So I always take them out if I can and flip them around. It means absolutely nothing. The writing has nothing to do with how structural or which way the beam should go. It just makes the frame a lot neater. So it's definitely one of those 1%ers I always try to do to make the frame look neater.
Alright, let's give this thing a shot. This lintel needs to go up 45mm, and it's only going half in here. So what I'm going to do, instead of taking this whole wall apart, I'm just going to mark 45mm across here, and we use the multi-tool just to take that 90x45 check out there, and then we can lift up that lintel.
So obviously we're rushing a little bit here and didn't properly look at the plans, but it doesn't really matter who makes mistakes as long as we get onto them early enough so we can fix them during the frame stage. What went wrong is that these lintels just got slapped underneath the top plate, and we had 2 4 beneath them, which is the right height for any internal doorways, but for our cavity cider pockets we want 2 450. So luckily if we get rid of this plate here, we can pop them up 45mm, and that's going to work perfectly for our cavity cider to fit in underneath them. In terms of the multi-tool though, it is cutting through really well. We can see there is a lot of smoke, and that's just because the blade is overheating in the timber. The main thing I'm really looking for and caring about in the multi-tool though is firstly if it does have enough power to cut and get through, which this one does. I've used more powerful ones, but this has enough power, I'm happy with it, it can do the job. But the more important thing is vibration, and there's not a lot of vibration with this Milwaukee multi-tool, and that is a massive win for Milwaukee. Using a multi-tool, especially if you're going to be using it a fair bit, if it's going to be vibrating all day and vibrating your hand, it's going to do your head in. So this tool is easy to use, easy to hold. The only downside I have to say about it is how annoying it is to change your blades. How you have to completely unwind a screw, take a screw out, and change your blades over. Apart from that, it is a great tool. The Milwaukee combo kit that I bought came with the Hacksaw, which is a smaller reciprocating saw. I've used this before, and for its size, it actually is a really good tool. This Hacksaw is designed to be used with one hand, and it's made for easier cutting in tight spaces or when you're using it overhead. It's not going to be as powerful as the full-size recips, but I think for most work, you're not going to have an issue with it. If you're doing renovations and you're cutting through a lot of old hardwood timber, that might be a job where you start to see the difference between this Hacksaw compared to the full-size recip. But for general construction, cutting through pine and nails, this Hacksaw seems to be really good. I did also switch over to start using the full-size recip. I wanted to see if it'd blow my mind going from the Hacksaw to the full-size recip. And yeah, the power definitely was better, but it wasn't anything mind-blowing. I was actually quite impressed with the power we got out of the Hacksaw. It doesn't help that I'm using a blunt blade, but I do want to reference the massive head-to-head video I did do about a month ago. In that video, we put 6 brands to the test, and I did test a range of different recips in this video. We can see the test I'm doing here is just cutting through a block of pine, which has 10 nails shot into it. And it does show that the full-size recips can get the job finished a lot quicker. With that being said, I still stand by this Hacksaw. It's obviously not as quick, but I think it's going to be sufficient in most jobs. Unless you're doing a lot of demolition, or you're making a lot of mistakes that you got to fix, I think it's a pretty good tool.
Are these, what are these studs? Are they the cut ones you did? Longer ones?
No, those are longer ones. These are
Sweet.
Those are longer.
Perfect, we can open that wall then, we'll frame this up.
Yeah.
And then that's all the standard stud sizes done, and then there's like 3 walls after that.
One thing I spoke about in the last video I did on the same extension is why we're going through planing these walls. We won't really get into that too much in this video, but I am going through and planing these walls where we are putting on any of our hoop-on straps. And for that, I've grabbed out Milwaukee's battery planer, and I've been giving that a crack, and I'm a bit disappointed with it. Previously, I've used DeWalt's battery planer for the longest time, and more recently, I've started using AEG's battery planer. And both of their builds are a lot smaller and slimmer. They're lighter, easy to use, which becomes a huge factor when you're going through and straightening walls for an entire day. If you're holding that planer out in front of you and going up and down the stud, up above your head and back down again, the weight is going to make a difference. So I was a bit disappointed with the size and how bulky Milwaukee's one was, and I wouldn't have been as disappointed if the size meant a bit more power, but it didn't feel like we got any more power or anything special out of this planer. One cool thing about it that I do love is that it has the dual dust extraction ports. There's a little switch in the front of the planer, and you can flick a dial and it changes which way the dust comes out of the side of the tool. It's a really cool concept. I've been using it more recently on my AEG planer, and one of the first things I said about that planer and that feature when I first unboxed my AEG planer is that I'm worried that over time you're going to get sawdust stuck in there, and it's going to affect the part in the middle of the tool, which changes to let the dust go out either side. And I've only used my AEG planer for about a month, and it has broken. And what makes it even worse now is it's stuck in the middle, meaning that the dust gets flown out on either side of the tool. It wouldn't have been as bad if the dust just came out one side of the tool and you can kind of move the tool around to make it work. But I have had that issue with the AEG planer. I can comment the Milwaukee one has been good so far. We haven't had that issue. So that is one really good thing about the Milwaukee planer. So for our hoop-on straps, obviously when the walls are laying down, we're planing one side of them. The whole reason for this is that we don't want the hoop-on to extrude out past the timber. But obviously the straps that wrap around the wall are going to come up to the timber on the other side. So before we do start laying the studs down and framing the wall out, I do need to go through and get the planer, plane the studs which are going to have straps in them. And before I open up the ball plates, I also went through and planed where the stud marking is, so that once the straps fold around the wall onto the other side and we nail them on once the walls are standing, it's going to be planed back on both sides and the straps won't be sticking out.
So we've got all the walls up. Plan now is we're going to go through top plates and start doing the beams. Once all the beams and top plates are up, then we'll go through afterwards and do all the bracing requirements. Doing the cross braces behind me, we've got a few walls that we're going to dynabolt into the brickwork, and then that will let us also play around with a few other tools such as the hammer drill. We use our impact driver to tighten the cross braces. For now though, we're going to be using some of the same tools for a bit just to get these beams up.
I'd ignore what I said. Before we do go through and start doing the top plates and the beams, I am going to secure this frame to the brickwork, which means we get to test out a few new tools. We've got Milwaukee's drill, which we're going to use to pre-drill a holes to the timber. We've got the hammer drill, obviously, to go through and drill into the brick. From what I'm feeling so far, the hammer drill seems to be really good as well. And honestly, I feel like anything related to a drill or a driver is going to be made really well by Milwaukee. So we're going to finish up the impact wrench to tighten the dynabolt. Now the dynabolts don't need a crazy amount of force to tighten them, but the impact wrench just did it perfectly anyway. There's no complaints at all with any of these tools. I need to put a fair few of these dynabolts in. The engineering does call for them to be every 400mm up and down the stud. So the stud's definitely going to go nowhere once it's all done. Now so far though, going through all the tools I've used today, Milwaukee makes some of the best tools, but my opinion hasn't changed on the saws. The saws are clunky and bulky, and I've got to say the planer is pretty similar with that too. Quite weird though, because the rest of the tools are so slick, they're powerful, they're great, and then it is so different when it comes to the saw and the planer. With that done, we also just got a delivery of a few 150 LVLs that would be missing. Sounds like there's a massive shortage right now just on the 150 LVLs. I've actually gone through a few jobs and all the beams just came for all those jobs apart from the 150s. So when we framed some of the walls up yesterday, we had to leave some of those lintels out. And I can chuck those in now. We also went through and ran a string line on all of the longer external walls, and they're all straight now. So we can go through and top plate those now and start putting the beams up. I tried filming the process of us going through and running the string lines. It's just a bit too awkward to get the camera set up and constantly move it around and show clearly what's happening there.
Cool. Nice.
This addition that we're doing is only going to be single story, so I'm not as worried about going through and leveling all the walls. If it was going to be a double story house, I'd get the laser out and make all the floor joists millimeter perfect so that the upstairs floor is perfectly level. Since there's just a roof getting built onto this, I'm not as worried. This beam here was sticking up a little bit too high though, so I did grab the planer out and used it one last time just to go over the beam and plane it down. It was also at this point of the day where I didn't realise that the mic died, so we've got no more natural sound of the tools being used. But from this point on, we just went through and finished off the top plates and didn't do too much more other than that.
I reckon whenever we try to do a video like this, I end up using so many tools that I like the brand that we try to do. So today we did a bit more framing, so I'm really gutted we couldn't get a Milwaukee framing gun, but I'm going to do a separate video in the future just on framing guns. I've been doing so much framing recently, been using the framing guns a lot, so I'd love to do a video separate. Obviously didn't use the radio, the vacuum, we got the torch in there and the grinder, which we didn't get to use as well. But a few tools that I didn't have in this combo kit that we did get to borrow and use today were the planer, rotary hammer and impact wrench. So it was a good selection of Milwaukee tools we did end up using. One thing I still can't stand about them, and the saw's not too bad, but I just can't get over how clunky and annoying those triggers are. Everything else is really good, it's just the saw and the planer had the same thing too. So that was doing my head in all day. Apart from that, as I mentioned, there's a few really nice things, including that saw guard.